Hi everybody, this is Hippie Hunter, and this is my review for the IJN Mogami. First, we're going to go over its armament real quick before we get into things. The Mogami is a battle rating 5.7 ship for Japan, heavy cruiser. Its armament consists of 10 203mm guns in twin mounts, 8 127mm guns in twin mounts, and an assortment of 25 and 13.2mm machine guns. Now, the Mogami is interesting because right now it sits at a weird place in the meta where it's right now the only viable counter to the Graf Spey. And when I mean viable counter, this thing absolutely demolishes Graf Speys. And it also can survive shots from them too. Mogami right now has its biggest strength in the fact that its 10 203mm guns have a round that's strong enough to go through the belt armor of the Graf Spey, and at longer ranges, it also causes plunging fire on the top deck of the Graf Spey, allowing it to plunge through the top deck and hit the ammunition stores in the Graf Spey. It also makes short work of other cruisers, mainly thanks to its absolutely overwhelming broadside firepower. The guns may not have the strongest reload, but it's good enough to get the job done. The shells also pack quite the punch. Now, one thing I also wanted to go over, we look at the armor here, is that the Mogami also resists HE shells from the Graf Spey pretty easily. Now you can see that its armor segment here on the side profile is made up of 3 different layers. You have a smaller 25mm layer, a 65mm layer, a 100mm layer, and a top 60. The nice thing about these middle layers is that depending on how far out your target's shooting at you, their shells are going to impact a certain layer the most. At longer ranges, most shells will land on this 100mm layer on your belt. This means that you will get the most effective performance or effective protection at longer ranges with this 100mm belt. By the turrets, you have a 140mm plate, which will protect you from plunging fire and close range. That being said, the Mogami has one very, very interesting thing about its playstyle. The Mogami overall should not be used at close range. This is because the plates on its belt and around its ammo stores, while thick, are not enough to stand up to shells at close range. However, if you bring the Mogami 8K and out, you will basically bounce or be resistant to 150mm rounds, 127mm rounds, and occasionally 200 plus millimeter rounds firing HE. And on occasion AP, though that mainly only applies to the Prince Eugen / Hipper. At longer ranges, these armor plates have enough effective armor to basically stop incoming shells from the smaller calibers. Also, because of how Mogami's armor scheme is laid out, with complete protection over the engine room, HE shells from the Graf Spey will usually not chunk the ship as much as others if hit in the sides. This means that you can reliably tank a couple HE shells from Graf Spey. Now granted, fighting a Spey you should always avoid to get hit in the first place. But that brings us to our next plus of the Mogami. The Mogami is also able to outrun or outmaneuver most ships, partially because of its 64km/h top speed. What this means is that the Mogami is more than able to run away from any fight it doesn't like. Let's say an Eugen is fighting you, let's say a Graf Spey is fighting you, or even another Mogami. You can gain range, head away from your target, and basically just run away, smoke, and then re-engage on your own terms. Outside of another Mogami, no other cruiser with decent guns is going to be able to chase you down and close the distance. This means that Mogami can decide when and where it wants to fight, and on what terms. This is great for the ship because it means that you don't need to worry about engagements unless you dictate them yourself. Another thing I'd like to point out with Mogami is that its ammunition stores are pretty well protected by its armor. Now, I would like to note that the turrets are only protected by 25mm of armor. This generally isn't an issue unless you get shot bow on from an AP shell. Normally, the HE splash will only take out one turret, with the occasional Graf Spey shell able to take out 2, but I find that very rarely happens. Now on to the negatives. Mogami does have a few negatives. The largest negative being its anti-aircraft equipment. It only has 4 dual 25mm AA mounts. This means that you will suffer constantly from AA attack. The 13.2mm machine guns I don't even count because they're pretty much useless all the time. Their placement also isn't the greatest. You have some up in the front and you have some in the middle section here. The biggest issue with the 13.2s is that other cruisers in the game have a mixture of 20mm, 40mm, and 37mm anti-aircraft cannons making up their light AA suite. This means that the 20mm, which only engage out to 2.2 to 2.5 kilometers, are complemented by 40mm and 37mm anti-aircraft guns, which hit out to 4.5 kilometers. This means that other ships have reliable firepower at both close and medium ranges, along with their secondary weapons being effective as well. Mogami's 25mm AA guns are all that it has in the light AA suite. These guns have slow targeting, have to reload constantly, and also only have that short 2.5 kilometer range. This means that oftentimes you will end up having having planes already carry out their attack and release their bomb or torpedo on you by the time your guns get on target and start shooting. This means with Mogami that you need to be constantly aware of your surroundings and always know when there's a plane in the area. Now this brings me into my next subject. It's not a downside of Mogami, but Mogami also has 24 long-lance torpedoes. These are set in two launchers on either side, and it also has a reload of 6. So you get 12 torpedoes per side overall. Now, in order to use Mogami effectively, you need to understand how to avoid planes, use your main guns, and use torpedoes all at the same time. Other cruisers don't have this heavy torpedo armament to rely on, so you don't need to worry about it as much. But because long lances travel at a very, very fast speed and travel a very long distance, you need to be able to understand how to use them effectively in order to use Mogami effectively. Because of the high kill potential, using the torpedoes is necessary. If you don't use the torpedoes on Mogami, you're only using the ship at 1/3 its peak performance, with the other being main guns AA, and also maneuverability if you would like to count that as well. So learning how to master torpedoes in Mogami is a very, very, very important thing to do. I'm considering doing another video about torpedo aiming in the future. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in that. Anyways though, back to the torpedoes. The torpedo angles are okay. They usually come out at this angle that we're looking at the ship right now. They do not have any forward firing arcs. The good thing though is because of how maneuverable Mogami is, you don't need to expose yourself for too long. Now let's say you're being engaged by a ship and you need to run away. The best thing to do is turn to an angle that doesn't completely turn yourself away to them, but to turn at a 45-degree angle from your opponent and retreat while smoking and also firing at the same time. Mogami also does a great job in its broadside. As I showed you before, the shells do a really good job at dealing with targets. One of the biggest reasons I feel why it does a good job with Graf's Bay is not because of the plunging fire, but also because of how many guns it has. 10 guns is 10 chances for an ammo rack. And that is something that should not be scoffed at. The ammo rack potential of this ship is insane because of the 10 guns. Pensacola has this to a similar degree, however the Pensacola's armor cannot stop shots at long range. Once again, to reiterate, the Mogami's belt armor is superb as long as you keep it over 8K from your target. Oh, what's going on there? As long as you keep the Mogami 8K from your target, you should have a good time. Now, in terms of playstyle, I like playing the Mogami in wide open areas. I also only play it in EC. I don't think the ship should be played in regular RB battles, mainly because it doesn't have that ability to get out to that 8K range where its belt armor becomes godlike, and can stop pretty much any shell aside from the Graf bays. Now, the other reason why I like it in EC is because you can bring it out multiple times and you're guaranteed to see cruisers. Normally, I don't like doing matches where I'm facing only destroyers, mainly because it doesn't bring the ship out to its full potential. When you get into EC battles, you tend to face cruisers more. Also, one other thing I wanted to note, there will be some gameplay for this video as well. In this gameplay, I just touch on a few light things about the ship. I'm also going to just show what a regular battle looks like. For my reviews, I'm not going to be showing inflated kill games with 35 plus kills. I'm just going to show what an average battle in the ship looks like. Mainly because everybody doesn't have insanely good games all the time. Sometimes you have bad games. The clip I'm actually going to show is one where we lost. So I want to show clips that show what a regular average experience is in Mogami. Right now, though, I find the ship to be extremely rewarding to play, challenging to master, and above all, I think it's the best counter to the Graf Bay at the current moment. I would actually rate it as the number 2 ship in Naval right now, for cruisers at least. Anyways, though, I have some footage recorded for you guys, so let's hop into the gameplay. Alright, so today's gameplay will be taken from an RB EC match on New Guinea. So I'm just about to spawn in the Mogami. And one thing I just want to bring up once again with the Mogami, and especially game modes, is I don't find the Mogami viable to be played in regular standard RB matches. Once again, as I showed in the hangar, the armor really shines above 8k kilometers, and you'll rarely be able to keep it at that range in standard battles. So EC, I believe, is the home that it belongs in. Also just because it needs a lot of room to maneuver, which is part of Mogami's playstyle. And in regular RB matches, you don't have that. So right now, I'm lining up some torpedo spreads. I am looking at that ship. Oh, there's a Z-20, or 1936. Hello there, sorry about that. Anyways, back to the torpedoes. So, I'm not just aiming at that guy over there. I'm setting up a spread for any potential ship in that area. Mainly, I'm just locking on to him as a base point to see where he is, because I'll use that as a place to figure out, well, a bunch of other ships spawned. Need to launch some torpedoes ahead of that, and especially with the long lances, it's pretty easy to figure out where your torpedoes are going to be in 5 minutes. Basically, you just got to think, okay, how fast does my torpedo go? Just think about that in your head, and then eventually just figure out, you know, well, if it takes that fast per second to get to where it's going, in 5 minutes it should be at X point. So it kind of is hard to explain in words, but when you play more matches, you get the hang of it, and you start to learn how long it takes your torpedoes, depending on the nation, to get to a X point. So in this match, by the way, I'm playing with Flip Stug. He is going to be in the Graf Bay for the majority of the match. So right now, I believe I'm sighting a convoy, which Stug told me about, and I'm blind to at the moment. Now would be a perfect opportunity for some sand people to appear. Oh, no sand people. Okay. I think there's a spay in that convoy, though. So right now, I'm just executing a turn. I want to go down the southern side of the map, so I'm turning. And this also highlights a great thing about the Mogami. It's extremely maneuverable for a heavy cruiser, and this just shows just how well it turns for a ship of its size, especially compared to the other heavy cruisers. So I believe what we're going to do next is we're going to jump ahead to some action, since we sound like we're 10 minutes isn't that exciting. So anyways, let's jump ahead to when we start getting into some of the action. Okay, so we're a little bit further ahead. Right now I've spotted I believe it's a Moskva. I'm using HE for this at the moment, mainly because destroyers I don't really like using AP against. If I'm in between reloads, I won't cancel it, but generally you want to use HE for destroyers. The HE of the shell of the Mogami is pretty good. I'd say it's a little bit towards the middle of the pack. But anyways, right now what I'm doing, I'm just evading just in case he launched torpedoes. And I believe I've sighted a spay, so we're going to jump ahead to that clip and see how I engage it. Alright, so here we are. So right now I've seen a spay and I'm backing off to re-engage. And I also see another one. I think my re-engagement I want to close to a certain distance. Generally with Mogami, you can hit 17k shots. I like closing to around 14k to engage. Oh, and there we go. You remember those torpedoes I launched earlier? That's the first one that I profited off of. So we sunk a Z-20 Carl Galster off of that. So which reminds me, I got to lay my second spread. One thing that I can't stress enough about the Mogami is you got to be OCD about everything. If you're not moving in a circle, if you're not pivoting, you got to be firing your guns. If you're not pivoting, you got to be launching torpedoes. You got to be doing all of those things. If you're not using your torpedoes in the Mogami, you're not firing your guns, or you're not maneuvering, you're not using the whole package together. So as you can see though, if you get used to the torpedoes, you can definitely hit long-range torpedo shots. It just takes time. So right now I'm being sighted by the Spey. Now I don't exactly want to gauge him fully yet until I'm at a better position. I also right now I'm working off Stug right now, so I'm seeing if he can engage the target and take some heat off. If not, I think I'll just smoke and turn away, since the great thing about the Mogami is that its speed allows it to dictate fights. So you can just pop smoke and turn away if you need to. Get out of engagement range and mess up their range. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing right here. I know that I'm not in a favorable position to engage the Spey here, so I turn tail and start extending outwards. This allows me to, first of all, regroup and rethink on how I want to approach him. It also throws off his aim as well, because if you're going from switching to going in a straight line to going back and away from the target, he has to now account for a different change in direction and the range estimates on his end going up. So it basically throws another wrench into his thinking. Basically, you want to be playing mind games. You want him to think, okay, now I need to add another level of thinking on top of what I'm already doing. So I'm going to disengage for a little bit. And I'm going to think of my next move. So I can tell that he's a good shot because he's hitting me pretty accurately from this range. He's also using HE, which shows that he is a good player in the Spey as well. More novice players in the Spey tend to use AP. So, and I don't think it's necessary because you don't really need to overpen any type of armor with the Spey's rounds. So I'm just checking my map position, his map position, and I'm going to turn back in. Once again, the Mogami is extremely maneuverable, so you can use that to your advantage. Now, the 10-gun salvo is also the thing that sets Mogami apart from other ships. Pensacola, I think, is the only other ship that has a 10-gun broadside with 200mm plus guns. And that's one of the primary reasons why it hits so hard, is the Mogami is able to just deliver such an incredible opening salvo, and the guns have a decent reload too, that it can compete with things like the Spey. A flip side, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, is that the Mogami is actually bigger than the Spey, so it also has a huge amount of internal volume to soak shots. So if your armor doesn't hold for whatever reason, there's still so much internal volume they have to hit, and they need to hit something critical in. So right now I'm still figuring out how I want to engage. I still want to get closer before I start shooting, and or just line up my shots. I actually think I'm fine with the range here. I think I just want to get my shots figured out. Yep, that's what it was. Okay, I thought I was further out. So right now I'm lining up my shots, and basically I'm trying to walk my shots on target. I want to see where they land and once they hit the ship, and then once they hit the ship in a spot that I'm comfortable of is going to stay accurate, I'm going to shift my aim to start aiming for ammo racks. So right now I'm just searching for hits. I think I have a pretty good idea of where I'm going to be hitting him. Basically I want to try and hit him at least in the middle of the ship, because then it's easier to figure out, oh, I need to go front or back. Okay, so I hit him in the middle of the ship. Now I'm just going to adjust to shoot forward. I'm going to start going for ammo now. So a little bit more forward. And we adjust. And I believe this should be a kill shot. Yep, there we go. So that's a Spey down. So That's another thing that I need to mention about the Mogami. The Mogami is more than capable of taking on a lot of the stronger ships. It just comes down to knowing where to land your shots. And that's one of the reasons why I also think it's one of the top tier ships, is that it really, really, really can compete well. We're about to go into another clip. Give me a second here. Now, I believe right now I'm just positioning for whatever respawns come up, or I believe I'm adjusting for the other spay. And now we fast forwarded a little bit. Right now we're still engaging that same spay as before, but this is where the engagement actually starts and I start laying shots down. Now, what I'm going to do for the majority of this clip, and actually for the rest of the video, is I'm going to go over matchups. So the first one we're going to start with is, let's start with USA and the Pensacola. So facing the Pensacola in the Mogami, main thing you got to do is just make sure you keep it range. The AP shells on the Pensacola have good pen. Biggest thing you got to watch out for is just not letting him get bow shots on you. Also making sure that you stay at, probably I'd recommend going 12k out. That way your armor actually has some chance of withstanding the shots from him. If you see the Pensacola first, you will undoubtedly get the kill. Now, the other thing about the Pensacola I want to mention too is that because its armor is so thin, you can use HE against it. However, though, if you know you're good at hitting ammo racks, you should be fine. Alright, next up is the Brooklyn/Helena. So for matchups for those, by the way, just in case you're wondering, I died, and this is a clip of my second respawn. So as you can see, the crew percentage changed. Anyways, back to the Brooklyn/Helena. Brooklyn/Helena is an interesting matchup, mainly because their volume of fire can be problematic for Mogami, especially if they hit your turrets. However, you don't really need to worry about Brooklyn penning your belt armor if you're above 8k kilometers. It's just the volume of fire you need to watch out for. Now, in terms of killing Brooklyn, the big thing you got to try and do with Brooklyn is you got to pen the turrets. The turret barbettes, which are those cylinders underneath the turrets, is what houses all the ammo for the Brooklyn. Now, those have a decent amount of armor on them, so at longer ranges, since you can't actually get plunging fire on the barbettes themselves, you can on the turrets, but that's a really weird shot to hit. Because you can't really pen the barbettes at range, you're going to have to do some trickery with that. Generally, I find if you hit it flat on at range, it'll be fine, but you got to get like that lucky Hail Mary shot there. Otherwise, what I would do is I would go through and I would basically try and disable the turrets. If you can't disable the turrets, I would go for steering and then just pick their modules apart one by one. I wouldn't use HE on them just because of how much volume of fire they put out. Basically, if you're using HE and he's using HE, he's going to win that fight just through volume of fire and rate of fire too. He's just going to put out more rounds downrange than you. So you don't want to get into an HE battle with a Brooklyn. Basically, just try and go for the ammo rack. It's harder than most ships to hit the ammo, but once you figure out where it is, it's a lot easier than you think. Okay, next up. Next, we're going to talk about Germany. Against ships like the Köln and the Nuremberg, it's pretty simple. There's not that much you need to do. Basically just aim for the ammo racks and you'll instantly ammo rack them. Against other ships, let me think, like Hipper are going to be a little bit more difficult, mainly because Hipper has this thing with its ammo racks and its armor belt where if you're under, I'd say about 8k, it's actually really hard to pen its belt armor because of how the turtleback armor works. However, the good thing about that, though, is because you normally keep Mogami at 8k plus, you don't have to worry about that. It's mainly just comes down to RNG bounces if you don't ammo rack Hipper. Also getting the range can be a little difficult. And how they position, if it's Hipper is played by a good player, it can actually be really difficult to get that ammo rack shot on them. But it mainly just comes down to just lining it up with them. There isn't anything else you need to do outside of that. Now for the Graf Spay, oh, and by the way, we just switched clips again. I ran out of footage from my previous game, so I didn't want to just keep talking to you in the darkness. Anyways, though, for ships like the Graf Spay, as you can see in this clip right now, generally you want to get them side on. You can get them at other angles too. The big thing you want to try and do with them, though, is you want to engage them at long range, and when they're shooting HE at you, you want to position yourself in a way that you're either broadside onto them and not giving them basically a front-on or a back-on shot. The reason why is because that HE shot will actually hit your superstructure at a really weird angle, and the fragments will go all over the top deck of your ship. If they're shooting you sideways, the fragments will all go in one direction. They'll basically go towards the other side of your ship, widthwise, not lengthwise. You don't want the HE shells to hit you lengthwise. That can cause some issues. But normally you can resist HE shells pretty well, even just taking it with your belt. Now, the Space AP is a little bit more of an issue. Thankfully, though, at this current stage in the game, a lot of them don't realize that they need to use AP against Mogamis, so they'll just spam HE at you, which gives you more time to react. Generally, you have a certain window to kill a Spay too. You can resist the HE, but it will kill you eventually if he's landing shots. So if you're being targeted by a Spay, either gain range and disengage, or you want to see how fast you can kill them. If you already have their guns trained on them when they start hitting you, you should win that firefight just because your reload is faster. But if you get caught unaware, I would disengage, smoke disengage, come back in on your own terms, and then engage them. In terms of killing them, just aim for the front turret. As I explained earlier in my video, just find where you are landing your shots and then just walk them onto the turret ammo rack. That's the easiest way to kill them. Next, let's talk about Russia. Russian ships, oh, by the way, I haven't talked about the 5.0s mainly because they're pretty easy to kill regardless. I don't see you ever getting killed by one of the 5.0 cruisers in a gun duel. If you do, then we have other things to talk about. Next up is Russia. The Crim. The Crim I wouldn't use HE on, mainly just because it has a bunch of really, really weird armor, overlapping armor pieces, and the belt is actually pretty decent for its size. I will say, actually, I guess the one 5.0 I will talk about is the Kavkaz because of its 180mm guns. That thing has a worse armor profile than Crim, so basically just shoot it with AP in the ammo rack and it'll explode. Back to the Crim though. AP, generally if you can figure out where the 100mm guns are on the ship, that they have a huge ammo rack under them, that's where I would shoot on the ship. Next going up to Kirov. Kirov has a very weak armor belt. So basically, shooting AP right under the turrets should suffice. That being said, Kirov does have the potential to pen you with its 180mm guns just because of the pen on them. So if you want to go out to 10k to engage them, that might be a good idea just because at that range they might lack the pen to get through your belt armor. But you need to worry about those, mainly because the amount of HE filler in the 180s is pretty insane. So if they do pen near your ammo rack area, the chance of you dying is almost guaranteed. Basically, just make sure you know where they are. That's the same for all the ships with bigger guns, is just make sure you know where they are on the map. If you don't, then you're going to end up for a nasty surprise if you end up sailing into them or some other thing like that. So Kirov, pretty much, it's pretty easy to pen, just watch out for the 180s. Chapayev is a little interesting because Chapayev has a very strong belt as well, and you need plunging fire. So for Chapayev to guarantee you get plunging fire, you can get plunging fire at lower ranges, like at around 10k the guns start getting plunging fire, but I would take the ship out to around 15, maybe even 16k against Chapayevs, just so you're guaranteed the plunging fire and you don't need to worry about hitting the belt at all. If you get plunging fire in a Chapayev, it should kill it pretty easily. The biggest thing you got to worry about is the fact that they have very high HE filler on their 150 AP shells. So if you're under 8k, a Chapayev can kill you very quickly if they pen your belt, especially because under 8k you don't auto bounce their shells on your belt armor. The other thing I want to bring up with Chapayev too is that its turrets are also heavily armored, so I wouldn't recommend going for the turrets or the barbettes. You can hit the actual ammo just through plunging fire or the belt armor. If, as I said, I never like being under 8k, but if you're under 8k with the Mogami, then you can pen the belt armor. Another thing I want to just bring up too, just with Russian ships in general, they have absolutely atrocious torpedoes. Most of their ships start off with a stock 3-kilometer range on their torpedoes. Torpedo mode, they go up to 9 kilometers. I'm actually not sure what Chapayev has. It might be a little bit longer than that. But generally, you don't need to worry about Russian torpedoes if you're over 9k. So that's just something to consider. All right, next let's move along to Britain. For British ships, the Leander can be interesting. A well-angled Leander, if he's facing forward to you, can bounce some shots. But in that case, then you just got to readjust your aim, and I would just aim straight for his deck, because the deck armor in that it's okay, but it's not the greatest. So you can get through that pretty easily. The biggest thing with Leander is that he just doesn't have the DPS to fight you over a protracted engagement, and his because semi-armor piercing got a pretty big nerf recently, his semi-armor piercing shells won't actually be able to pen you even under 8k, but that's still not a reason to go under 8k. As I said, I can't emphasize that enough. Stay above 8k in this ship. So Leander is okay. Dido is weird, actually, going back to Dido. Dido is interesting because it's an AK ship that has like 57 millimeters of deck armor. So you'll end up in this situation where, plunging fire-wise, you may not be able to pen the deck armor of the Dido. And it's actually got pretty good protection over its underwater ammo racks. The good thing, though, is that it literally can't do anything against you at longer ranges because the guns are so small. So in that case, what I would do is I would just use HE against the Dido, mainly because you can get weird bounces with the deck armor, which it can lead to some hilarious situations where you can't kill a Dido from 18k out. The biggest probably issue or difficult fight in the British tree would be against the Southampton or the Belfast. Now keep in mind, Southampton has weaker turrets, but it has bridge armor and it has torpedo tubes. Belfast trades the bridge armor for extra turret protection, so the turrets are harder to knock out, but the bridge is completely unprotected. Something I like to do if I have HE loaded is I will try for a bridge shot on on Belfast, because it will bridge it. They're pretty easy to tell apart too, just from their structure and superstructure and mass shape. But if you can't, I would just shoot AP at the ammo racks. Their underwater ammo racks are kind of hard to hit, even with plunging fire, because of how deep they are in the ship. So aim waterline. You'll generally need to get a flat-on shot on the actual piece of armor that's protecting the underwater ammo racks to get a good shot and a clean kill. But it'll happen eventually. Otherwise, you can try for plunging fire and just extend and evade. Both of them have a top speed of around 60 kilometers an hour, so you can just outpace them and run away. The best thing about facing them, though, is the fact that with the semi-armor piercing nerf, they'll have a absolute horrendous time getting through your main armor belt. So you can just sit at range and pick away at them. Next up, we're going to go to Japan. Japan is pretty much like a mirror match. For Mogami versus Mogami, I'm going to start at the end of the tree. For Mogami versus Mogami, it pretty much comes down to who's a better player at maneuvering and gunnery. Maneuvering-wise, because the better Mogami player will just outmaneuver the other one and give you less time on target. That's the one thing I think I stressed it somewhat, but maybe not enough, is that if you're good at maneuvering with Mogami, you'll be able to completely outplay your opponent. Next we have Furitaka, and Furitaka has 6 guns instead of the 10 of Mogami. The belt is easier though, so it's pretty easy to pen. The big thing you just got to watch out for is that they can pen your belt as well, so I would just make sure you take them out as soon as possible with AP. As I said, the biggest issue you got to deal with them is just the fact that they can pen your belt as well, and they can get plunging fire on you. Same goes for Kako, though Kako has less guns. You'll just out DPS Kako because of your rate of fire. Suzuya, I actually the new Mogami hold ship that gets the triple 150s instead of the 203s in its turrets. That ship I haven't really faced yet, so I don't know what the matchups are like against it. From what I've seen, it's just going to be a mirror match against Mogami. Just they can't pen you at ranges above 8 kilometers, reliably that is. So that's all for that one. Overall, though, those are what the matchups are like. Oh, one ship I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention the Atlanta. Atlanta is basically like facing a Dido, but you can actually pen them plunging fire and at any ranges, which is nice. So just shoot AP into the ammo racks with them. Anyways, though, just in closing thoughts, I'm going to be doing some more reviews. I know this is my first time doing an actual review, so bear with me if my ums and ahs and speaking isn't the greatest. I'm going to work on getting better at that. But anyways, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know in the comments section. And let me know what you want me to review next. I have most of the top tier ships, and I'm happy to review anything. Anyways, though, I hope this will be a great journey reviewing Naval, since nobody else is really in the space. So for those of you that are subscribed, thank you. If you're interested, like and subscribe. Thanks very much, guys. Bye.